$47 billion. Gone. Just like that. Poof.
Yeah, it really does make you wonder, how does that even happen?
It's WeWork, right? Everyone knows the name.
Oh,
I mean, at least they know it now. But it's crazy to think about how quickly this whole thing just imploded.
absolutely. And the story behind it, it's not just about office space. It's about ambition. It's about believing in something so strongly, so completely, that you kind of lose sight of reality.
And maybe convince a whole lot of other people to do the same along the way.
Precisely.
I see. Well, we've got a ton of material here, articles, interviews, documentaries, trying to piece together the whole WeWork saga. And I mean, where do you even begin with something this wild?
I think the best place to start is with that $47 billion valuation. It's almost unfathomable.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It reflected a deep belief in Adam Neumann's vision, this whole idea of, revolutionizing work, creating these communities. It was intoxicating to a lot of people.
Adam Neumann. Okay, so let's talk about him. I mean, the guy's a character, right? From what I've read, 13 different homes growing up, spending time on a kibbutz.
Yeah, and he wasn't a huge fan of the whole everyone gets paid the same thing, even back then.
Sounds like he had his sights set on something a little grander. And New York City was always the target.
New York, the city of big dreams and even bigger fortunes. It's the perfect setting for this story.
So we've got this ambitious guy, right? But what about his early ventures? The stuff he tried before WeWork? Because I've got to say, some of it is just wild.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the collapsible high heels. Not just impractical, they were apparently dangerous.
Yeah, someone almost lost a finger. I mean, who thought that was a good idea?
But then you've got crawlers, the baby clothes with built-in knee pads. I mean, come on.
The tagline was, just because they don't tell you doesn't mean they don't hurt. Like, babies are just silently suffering from bruised knees.
Right. Babies have been crawling forever. They're fine.
Okay, so maybe not the best ideas, but he was selling these things, right? Like actually going out there and convincing people.
Oh, yeah. He had a real knack for sales, even then. He could talk anyone into anything.
So big dreams, incredible salesmanship, maybe not the best judgment. What's the next chapter?
Well, that's where the story takes a turn. It's almost a cliche, but it all starts with a chance encounter. The legendary elevator meeting.
Okay, so I've heard about this. Adam, not exactly dressed for a business meeting, no shirt, no shoes.
And in that elevator, just by chance, is Miguel McKelvey, who would become his co-founder.
Talk about a contrast in personalities.
Yeah.
Neumann, this bold, almost larger-than-life salesman, and McKelvey, much more reserved, more the design and architecture mind.
And their backgrounds. Couldn't be more different. Neumann kind of bouncing around the kibbutz experience. And McKelvey growing up on a commune, a childhood marked by, real financial hardship.
Wow. So what brings these two very different individuals together?
It's the classic story. The desire to make money. They started talking, brainstorming ideas, and Neumann had heard about this concept of renting out office space to smaller companies.
So always the bold one. Adam goes straight to his own landlord, Joshua Gutman. And Gutman's got some empty floors in his building, right?
Empty floors that are costing him money. And Neumann basically says, look, let us use your space. We'll find tenants. We'll handle everything. We split the profits.
I can just imagine Gutman's reaction. Like, who are these guys? They sell baby clothes and now they're real estate moguls.
Well, supposedly Neumann's response was something like, your building's empty. What do you know about real estate? I mean, the guy had confidence.
That's for sure. So Gutman takes a chance? Maybe he saw something in them that spark.
Or maybe he was just desperate to fill those empty floors. Either way, he asks for a business plan, which, get this, they didn't actually have.
No business plan.
Nope. McKelvey apparently pulls an all-nighter, just frantically writing something up before their next meeting.
That's amazing. So this cobbled-together business plan, it's enough to convince Gutman.
Enough to give them a shot, a few floors to work with, and Neumann even gets him to pay for the renovations. That's classic Neumann, right?
So Green Desk is born, and they go with the whole eco-friendly vibe, even though it sounds like that wasn't really the driving force.
More of a marketing tactic than a genuine commitment to sustainability. But the core business model, that was smart. They create this co-working space, dividing floors into smaller offices, shared amenities, the whole package.
And crucially, they offer short-term, flexible leases, which is brilliant, especially considering what's happening in the economy at the time.
Right. It's 2008, the financial crisis. People are losing their jobs, starting their own ventures. They don't want to be locked into long-term leases.
Makes sense. So Green Desk is a hit. They fill up the building, right? Hundreds of tenants.
They did, and it was more than just office space. It was the beginning of that community aspect. They'd organize networking events, parties. It was a vibe.
But Adam, he's already thinking bigger, like way bigger.
Oh, yeah. Global domination. He's talking about a global movement. And that clashes with Gutman's more cautious approach.
Gutman's probably thinking, hey, this is working. Let's not get too crazy. But that's not Adam's style, is it?
Not at all. Neumann wants to expand rapidly, lease buildings independently. And Gutman's worried about the risk. I mean, you're offering short-term leases to tenants while being locked into these long-term agreements with landlords.
That's a pretty big risk.
It is. But Neumann is convinced this is just the beginning. He persuades McKelvey to sell their shares back to Gutman.
For how much?
Around $500,000 each, which at the time is a pretty good chunk of change.
Not bad for a couple of years' work. And that's the seed money for WeWork.
Exactly. And Neumann, already thinking ahead, tells McKelvey, don't touch your money, you'll spend it. He knew they needed every dollar for this next venture.
So, WeWork. Even before they had the name, Adam's already talking about being a billionaire.
And not just office space. He's got hotels in mind, restaurants, all sorts of things.
McKelvey, being the more grounded one, probably had to remind him, hey, let's maybe get a name first.
Right. They go through brainstorming sessions, and finally, WeWork emerges, capturing that community feel, but also with the potential for anything, right?
We sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was going for the whole ecosystem. But initially, it's very similar to Green Desk, right? Co-working spaces, short-term leases.
But there's a key difference. They're leasing entire buildings independently now, much riskier, and they need serious capital.
Enter Joel Schreiber.
Young real estate developer. Adam somehow convinces him to invest $15 million for a third of a company that doesn't even have a single office open yet.
They hadn't even signed a lease.
But Neumann is a master salesman. He throws out a $45 million valuation. And Schreiber, he buys it.
So $15 million just on an idea and a whole lot of charisma.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And Schreiber's investment, it was crucial. He had credibility in the New York real estate world. Doors start opening. They get their first location.
154 Grand Street.
Yeah.
Not exactly glamorous, right?
A bit run down, 6 floors, that notoriously slow elevator. But it's a start.
And they hustle to get tenants. Literally going into Starbucks, pitching people working on their laptop.
Classic startup mode. Neumann's the charismatic CEO, already doing tequila shots in meetings. And McKelvey, he's focused on the design. Boutique hotels are his inspiration.
Lots of glass, open spaces, creating that feeling of connection, of transparency.
Exactly. They're not just renting desks. They're selling a lifestyle.
And community is a huge part of that. Neumann, in his very first email to their first employee, lays out his grand vision. Let's build the largest networking community on the planet.
Think about that. From a single rundown building in Soho to the entire planet. That's the kind of ambition we're dealing with here.
And let's talk about the logo. A stick figure smashing a computer with a sledgehammer. You couldn't get a more anti-corporate image.
It perfectly captured that rebellious spirit, that rejection of the traditional office environment. You know, the gray cubicles, the fluorescent lights.
It appealed to a certain generation, right? Millennials especially. They wanted something different.
Absolutely. A place where work wasn't just work. It was also social. It was fun.
But it wasn't all free beer and skateboarding CEOs.
No. It was intense. Long hours. Everyone pitching in, no matter what your job title was. You could be assembling furniture one day, painting walls the next.
Because Adam was always pushing. Always on to the next thing.
Right. And the pay, often below market rate. But they were promised stock options.
Which, let's be honest, a lot of those younger employees probably didn't fully grasp. But it was part of the narrative. Work hard now, be a millionaire later.
Exactly. It was a powerful motivator, especially when you believe in the vision, in the leader.
And the growth was undeniable. By 2011, they're making over $7 million in revenue.
But they're also losing money. And that rapid expansion, it's fueled by investor dollars.
Neumann was out there, charming venture capitalists, painting these pictures of billions in future profits.
He knew how to put on a show, activate the space parties, perfectly timed for investor visits, making everything seem vibrant, exciting.
But the real key was his pitch. He wasn't selling a real estate company. He was selling a tech company.
That was brilliant. The first physical social network, Uber for offices, the next Google. These were the buzzwords that got investors excited.
And the PR team, they were under strict orders. Never call WeWork a real estate company.
And venture capitalists, they love tech. They love scalability. They love the potential for exponential growth. Real estate, not so much.
But the reality was, WeWork was carrying all the costs of a real estate company. Those long-term leases, the maintenance, the overhead, it was all there.
And Adam himself, while a brilliant storyteller, he wasn't a tech guy. He barely used a computer, couldn't code. He was all about the vision, the big picture.
And the idea of scaling community, that's a tricky one. Community is organic, it takes time, it's not an algorithm.
Exactly. But that was part of the narrative. They were disrupting work, creating something entirely new.
And Neumann convinced investors to focus on revenue growth, downplaying the lack of profit.
He would point to Amazon, to other tech giants. We're investing in the future, he'd say. Profits will come later.
But those revenue projections, often doubling year over year, was that even realistic?
Not really, and there were no real network effects, no sustainable competitive advantage. It was all about growth, growth, growth.
And the investors kept buying it. Benchmark, a huge name in venture capital, they invest over $16 million at a $100 million valuation.
That was a major turning point. Benchmark had backed companies like Uber and Instagram. Their involvement gave WeWork instant credibility.
And with each funding round, the valuation kept soaring. Neumann had more and more capital to play with.
And more control. He structured his shares to have 10 times the voting power of regular shares. He even declared, I am WeWork.
Wow. Okay, so the ego is starting to inflate a little bit.
A little bit. And then there's the tech ventures. WeConnect, their internal social network. Buggy, barely used.
I remember that. They even talked about launching a WeWork cryptocurrency.
And then, almost unbelievably, they forget to renew employee healthcare benefits after raising millions of dollars.
Seriously, that's unbelievable. And on top of that, Adam starts selling off his own shares pretty early on.
Which is a big red flag for a lot of investors. Founders usually hold on to their shares until after an IPO.
It's like he knew something we didn't. Okay, so WeWork's valued at billions, but how are they actually doing compared to their competition?
Well, there's IWG. They're the biggest player in the flexible workspace market. More members, more locations, and they're actually profitable.
But their valuation is nowhere near WeWork's.
Which makes you wonder, right? Were investors just caught up in the hype? The greater fool theory at play?
Hoping to sell their shares later at an even higher price.
Possibly. But WeWork was a story, a narrative. IWG was just a company.
Okay, let's talk about the WeWork summer camp, because this is where things start to get really weird.
Oh, yeah. Extravagant, multi-day events, basically mandatory for employees. Millions of dollars spent.
Big-name musical acts, flown in on helicopters.
Lord, the Chainsmokers, Bastille, they were even paid in company stock.
Paid in stock for a summer camp.
Yep. It was all about creating this intense, immersive experience, blurring the lines between work and life.
And Adam, staying in a luxury trailer while employees are camping in tents.
It definitely had a cult-like vibe to it. There was this unwavering devotion to Adam, to the WeWork vision.
And the partying.
Legendary, right?
Reports of marijuana smoke in the offices. Adam saying, I could buy this whole hotel during a drunken sledding incident.
They had, thank God it's Monday, meetings with tequila shots and WeWork chants. It's all starting to sound a little intense.
It was. And despite the revenue growth, the losses were piling up. $227 million lost in 2015 alone.
But Adam kept saying, don't worry, it's all part of the plan. We're prioritizing growth.
And the investors, for the most part, they believed him. They kept pouring money in, another $355 million at a $5 billion valuation. Okay, but this is where it gets really crazy. WeWork starts branching out into all sorts of random ventures.
We Studios, basically to boost Rebecca's film career, a boutique gym, even a WeWork fragrance.
A fragrance? Seriously?
Yeah, they were talking about WeWorld, about colonizing Mars. There were failed attempts to buy Etsy, to buy Magnesis, that company behind the Fire Festival.
The Fire Festival, that's another whole deep dive we could do.
Oh, absolutely. And Neumann's friendship with Jared Kushner led to some pretty out there ideas.
Reimagining post offices, libraries. The guy was on a roll.
And then you have WeLive, the communal living apartments, basically adult dorms.
An idea he actually pitched and got rejected in college.
Full circle, right. But the economics were questionable, and it just added to that whole cult-like atmosphere.
Employees living in WeLive, working in WeWork. Where does it end?
And the costs kept rising. They tripled their employee headcount, with reports of a lot of nepotism in hiring.
And their technology. Not exactly cutting edge. Security flaws, low usage of their WeConnect platform.
And any negative press. shut it down. They even kicked out a data analytics company for publishing a report that wasn't flattering
Seriously.
under a happiness clause. And occupancy rates started dropping, leading to desperate measures: free rent, lavish dinners for new members.
While Adam himself is pushing for cost-cutting measures.
It was chaotic, and an employee leaks internal emails about layoffs, which doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture.
Okay, so by 2016, they're losing $1 million a day. But they're still valued at billions. How does that even work?
That's the question, right? They were bigger than Amazon and Apple were at their IPOs, but Adam kept delaying going public.
Probably didn't want that level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
But then comes Masayoshi-san.
Ah, Masa, the founder of SoftBank, a legendary figure in the tech world, known for making huge, often risky bets.
He was the one who invested early in Alibaba, right? Turning a relatively small sum into billions.
Exactly. He believes in founders, in vision. Less about the business plan, more about the shining eyes.
And he creates this $100 billion vision fund with a huge chunk of money coming from Saudi Arabia.
He's looking for the next generation of disruptive tech companies. And in 2017, he meets Adam Neumann.
The famous 12-minute meeting. Masa was running late, so we only had a few minutes to spare.
Neumann gives him the condensed pitch, emphasizing the tech narrative. They even show him their R&D lab.
Which was basically just a fancy standing desk and a phone booth, right?
Pretty much. But it's enough for Masa. He tells Neumann to join him in his car.
And in the back of that car, he offers WeWork $4.4 billion.
Valuing the company at $20 billion, the biggest investment the Vision Fund had ever made.
Just like that. In the back of a car.
Masa operates on gut feeling. He saw something in Neumann, a kindred spirit. He even compared him to Jack Ma.
So Masa's strategy was to identify potential winners and just flood them with money.
Exactly. Give them the resources to dominate their market. It was the era of the blitzscaling.
But within SoftBank, there were people who had serious doubts about WeWork.
They saw it for what it was, a real estate company with questionable financials.
But Masa, he's all about intuition. Don't think, just feel it, he'd say.
And he felt it with WeWork. The investment was announced. WeWork becomes one of the most valuable private companies in the U.S.
And Adam Neumann, he gets to sell off a big chunk of his stock, $361 million worth.
Which, again, raises eyebrows. But he's got Masa's backing, and Masa tells him, make it 10 times bigger.
10 times bigger. That becomes the mantra.
Mr. 10 times, they called him. And Neumann, already operating at 100 miles an hour, he kicks it into overdrive.
And the competition. They go after them aggressively, offering years of free rent to poach customers.
Even small businesses. They'd send fake customers to gather information. They even hired a steel drum band to disrupt a competitor's event.
A steel drum band? Seriously?
Seriously, they weren't playing around. Marketing spending triples. They could go from 100 to 200 locations in a single year.
But they're cutting corners, overpaying on leases, funding renovations themselves?
It's a mess. That $500 million profit target for 2017 becomes $1 billion loss.
And even some early investors are starting to get nervous.
They see the unsustainable growth, the lack of real community, but Adam dismisses it all.
Our valuation is based on energy and spirituality, he reportedly said.
Right, not exactly metrics you can measure on a balance sheet. And they keep spending on these tech projects that go nowhere.
And acquiring random companies. Wavegarden, the wave pool company, meetup.com.
Adam apparently wanted to buy every company he encountered.
It's like he was playing a game of Monopoly with real money. And his ego, through the roof.
He's talking about running for president of the world. He thinks WeWork can solve global hunger.
He throws this big creator awards event with Ashton Kutcher, investing in random startups.
He snubs the Prime Minister of Canada. He expands his office to include a sauna and a cold tub.
It's all getting a little out of control.
It was. And they make a strategic shift to focus on bigger enterprise clients.
WEOs, right?
Yeah. Which brings in more revenue, but it's even riskier. They're signing short-term deals with huge corporations.
And that IBM deal. Super shady. They're leasing space in a building Adam himself owns.
Talk about a conflict of interest. But he rejects advice to bring in experienced management. He wants to be in control.
That things are falling apart internally. Chaotic management, yes men everywhere, a paranoid culture.
They buy a $63 million private jet after cutting employee travel budgets.
And reports of Adam smoking weed on the jet, causing all sorts of problems.
Employee burnout is through the roof. Turnover is high. They have these restrictive non-compete agreements.
And then there's the meat ban, Rebecca's a vegan, so suddenly no one can eat meat in WeWork.
Even though Adam's reportedly spotted eating meat all the time.
It's like a parody at this point.
Yeah.
And then we have WeGrow.
The elementary school. Rebecca's pet project. No experience in education whatsoever.
Super expensive tuition, a bizarre curriculum. It just adds to the whole WeWork mystique.
Rebecca's influence is growing. She's listed as a co-founder, pushing McKelvey aside.
And the We Babies initiative, encouraging employees to have kids who can then attend WeGrow for free.
It's all getting a little too close for comfort.
So, end of 2018, WeWork is this sprawling, bizarre collection of businesses losing a ton of money.
But they're still valued at billions, and SoftBank is about to pump in another $20 billion.
Project Fortitude.
Adam's preparing for this massive influx of cash. He's already got plans for airlines, fitness centers, hotels.
He even considers buying Lyft.
He wants to be the world's first trillionaire. WeWork as a trillion-dollar company.
Vertical integration, controlling every aspect of the real estate process.
And he's raising a $100 billion real estate fund. He meets with Masa, lays out his vision.
We'll be too big to fail, he says.
And Masa, he buys it. Project WeWork reaching a $10 trillion valuation by 2028.
10 trillion. That's more than the entire GDP of Japan.
But that's Masa. He's all about those big, bold bets. So the deal is revised. $20 billion, valuing WeWork at $47 billion.
The company rebrands as the We Company. Adam unveils plans for entire We cities.
But within SoftBank, there are growing concerns. The financials are a mess. They're projected to lose $2 billion in 2018.
And they're running low on cash.
But Masa overrules his advisors. Feel the force, he says. The deal seems done.
Then, Christmas Eve, Adam's surfing in Hawaii.
And he gets the call. Project Fortitude is off.
Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi, the big investors in the Vision Fund, they've pulled out.
SoftBank itself is having problems. Their stock is down. Their mobile IPO was a flop.
The $20 billion is gone.
They offer a consolation prize, $2 billion.
Which is still a lot of money, but
it's a fraction of what they were expecting.
And they try to spin it. Ashton Kutcher goes on CNBC, tries to downplay the whole thing.
But Adam's stressed, and he starts making false claims about WeWork's financial runway.
Internally, employees are starting to panic. They're comparing it to Theranos.
But writing's on the wall.
And their growth is out of control. 79 new locations in December alone.
They become the largest private tenant in New York City. But their costs are spiraling.
Reverse economies of scale.
Yeah.
They're spending more as they get bigger.
Wasteful spending, duplicated roles, failed tech projects.
They need an IPO. They're running out of options.
But Adam's resisted it for so long, he doesn't want the scrutiny.
And Uber's IPO earlier that year was a disaster. A warning sign for Masa and SoftBank.
But they're running out of time. And Adam, incredibly, decides to accelerate growth even more.
It's like he's doubling down on a losing hand.
Yeah.
So they start preparing the S-1, the document you need to file for an IPO.
Project Wingspan. And it's a mess. Adam refuses to call themselves a real estate company.
He wants even more voting power. He wants Rebecca to choose his successor.
Rebecca's role is getting bigger and bigger. She's talking about the energy of we.
And they're focused on aesthetics, on lofty mission statements, rather than the actual numbers.
Rebecca reportedly complains about too many numbers in the S1. She wants to use recycled paper.
She says the IPO is about saving the planet. Their mission statement is to elevate the world's consciousness.
It's all very WeWork.
And the financials. They're using this made-up metric called community-adjusted EBITDA.
Trying to hide the massive losses, the SEC pushes back, demands revisions. It's a constant battle.
Finally, they release the S1, and the public reaction is brutal.
It's all laid bare. The self-enrichment, the leases on Adam's own buildings, the trademark sale.
They're losing $3,000 every minute.
The emphasis on community and Adam rather than, actual office space.
It's a joke. Landlords are worried. Employees are furious about Adam's stock sales.
And Adam and Rebecca, they're shocked. They actually thought they were doing good.
But the public sees it for what it is. A real estate company with huge losses and a charismatic leader who maybe got a little carried away.
And the market has changed. Investors want profits, not just growth.
Adam bombs the IPO roadshow. There are more reports about his behavior, his drug use.
It's all falling apart.
And that's the WeWork story. From baby clothes with knee pads to a $47 billion implosion, what strikes you as the biggest takeaway from all of this?
The power of narrative. Adam Neumann was a master storyteller. He convinced so many people to buy into his vision.
And that's the danger, right? How do we distinguish between real potential and just hype, especially when someone's so good at selling it?
It's a question we all have to ask ourselves, especially in today's world where there's so much noise, so many promises being made.
Absolutely. Because you think about that balance between enthusiasm and, basic business sense.
Where else do we see this happening? In tech, in finance, in politics.
It feels like it's everywhere.
And then there's the whole community aspect. Can something like that really be scaled? Or is it just a marketing ploy?
They tapped into a real need, but maybe they went about it the wrong way.
It's a fascinating question.
So what's the final thought? What do we take away from all of this?
In a world obsessed with growth and disruption, we need to be more critical. We need to look beyond the hype, beyond the charisma.
We need to ask the tough questions.
Because the next WeWork is out there. And it's up to us to spot it before it's too late.
Absolutely. That's a great point to end on. Be careful out there.